Alright, this is the second of our PowerPoints on the cardiorespiratory system, and this one will specifically look at the respiratory system. The learning objectives from this PowerPoint are the structure and function of the lungs, the mechanics of how we breathe, and also how gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged through the lungs and into the bloodstream. The main parts of the respiratory system are the nose and mouth, the nasal passage, the pharynx, the larynx, which sits in just below the pharynx, the trachea, the bronchi, and the bronchioles, and then the tiny little air sacs where the oxygen is transferred into the bloodstream, which are called alveoli or alveoli, which are these little air sacs over here. When we breathe in, the process of that is for the diaphragm and intercostal muscles to contract. And what happens there is when they contract, they pull down, and that creates space in the lungs. Now, when that space is created, there's a pressure difference, and the air from outside rushes in through the nose and through into the lungs. It's not actually your mouth or nose sucking in the air, it's actually the diaphragm contracting and creating that pressure difference. When we breathe out, the opposite happens. So the diaphragm relaxes, which means that it gets bigger and it takes up more space, and so all of that air is squeezed out of the lungs and pushed up back through the trachea, into the nasal passage, and out through the nose and mouth. A couple of key terms for when we breathe. One of them is called tidal volume. So tidal volume is the amount of air inhaled and exhaled per breath. Respiratory rate is how many breaths you take per minute. And minute ventilation or ventilation is the tidal volume times the respiratory rate. So that gives us a value for how much air you're breathing in per minute. A couple of things with regard to the respiratory rate, tidal volume. So you can see here, when you're at rest, you breathe about 12 times per minute. When you're at close to maximum, we're up to about 50 breaths per minute. So it quadruples between rest and maximal exercise. The tidal volumes, the amount of air that you breathe in and out, each breath goes up from 0.05 to 3.0 litres per breath. And the minute ventilation, which is a product of these two, is obviously going to also increase up to 150 litres of air coming into your lungs per minute. The main functions of the respiratory system include to supply oxygen to the bloodstream, which is obviously then going to be used by the muscles, and also to remove waste products such as carbon dioxide and other gases from the muscles and the bloodstream. I'm just going to show a quick YouTube clip which explains how the gases are exchanged in the lungs.
Air first enters the body through the mouth or nose and quickly moves to the pharynx or throat. From there, the air passes through the larynx or voice box and enters the trachea. The trachea is a strong tube that contains rings of cartilage that prevent it from collapsing. Within the lungs, the trachea branches into a left and right bronchus, which further divide into smaller and smaller branches called bronchioles. The smallest bronchioles end in tiny air sacs called alveoli, which inflate during inhalation and deflate during exhalation. Gas exchange is the delivery of oxygen from the lungs to the bloodstream, and the elimination of carbon dioxide from the bloodstream to the lungs. It occurs in the lungs between the alveoli and a network of tiny blood vessels called capillaries, which are located in the walls of the alveoli. Here, you see red blood cells traveling through the capillaries. The walls of the alveoli actually share a membrane with the capillaries. That's how close they are. This makes it possible for oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse or move freely between the respiratory system and the bloodstream. Oxygen molecules attach to red blood cells which travel back to the heart. At the same time, the carbon dioxide molecules in the alveoli are blown out of the body with the next exhalation. Gas exchange allows the body to replenish the oxygen and eliminate the carbon dioxide, both of which are necessary for survival.
So just to explain that again, so we've got our tiny little air sacs called alveoli, and the air comes in and out of the lungs and goes into the alveoli, and the capillaries, which are the small blood vessels, connect up with that alveoli. So the deoxygenated blood comes in, and then the carbon dioxide jumps across and then gets pushed out of the lungs. While that's happening, the oxygen comes in and jumps across, diffuses across, and attaches to the red blood cells, which then come through, and the oxygenated blood gets pumped back through the heart and then out to the body. So diffusion is that process of the carbon dioxide and the oxygen jumping across the wall of the alveoli into the bloodstream. Alright, another key term with regard to the lungs is called the vital capacity, and that measures the maximum amount of air you can breathe out after breathing in. And we're going to do a quick test on that. So we're going to measure how much air you can breathe out after breathing in. What we're going to do is get into groups of 2 or 3. Everyone needs a balloon, and what you will do is take a deep breath in as much as you can take, and then blow into the balloon as much as you can. Once you've done that, tie off the balloon, make sure you don't let any of that air escape, and then measure the circumference of the balloon at its widest point. That'll give you a measure for your vital capacity. Just pause the video and have a go at that now. Another key term is the VO2 maximum. So this is how we can measure how efficient our body is at using oxygen and getting it from the air into our lungs and into the bloodstream and to the muscles. So the VO2 maximum is the maximal amount of oxygen that can be taken into the body, transported to and used by the muscles. There's a test you can do, which I'll show on the next slide, which measures your VO2 max score. Another key term is the AVO2 difference. This is a measure of how well the muscles extract oxygen from the bloodstream. The AVO2 difference is the difference in oxygen concentration between the arterial and the venous blood. So the difference in the oxygen in the arteries compared to the veins. Now, to measure that difference shows how much oxygen the muscles are actually extracting from our capillaries. At rest, our AVO2 difference is about 4.5, or it can get a little bit higher if you're a trained athlete. And you can see as we start to exercise, that increases significantly. So our muscles start to extract more and more oxygen from the bloodstream. This is a picture of someone completing a VO2 max test. So you can see that they're hooked up to a machine here, which is measuring how much oxygen and carbon dioxide they're breathing in and out per breath. And that will be a maximum test, so that the treadmill speed would be slowly increased until they get to their maximum speed, and that will measure their VO2 max. You can see here are some scores for different athletes in terms of their VO2 max. So here, this is our age and related to males and females. So what you can see there is, as people get older, their VO2 max starts to decrease. So we start to lose that efficiency of our muscles to use oxygen from the atmosphere. Different sports require higher VO2 max scores as well. For example, the aerobic events such as rowing, rowing, alpine skiing, Nordic skiing, where there's very little concentration of oxygen at high altitude. Things like soccer and speed skating and swimming rely on a high VO2 max, whereas some of the less aerobic sports don't require as high a VO2 max. For example, discus here, which is a very anaerobic sport, generally athletes don't have a very high VO2 max score. This is some VO2 max scores of some famous athletes, probably a little bit before most of your time, but you might notice there's a guy here called Lance Armstrong who's been in the news a bit recently. He won the Tour de France 7 times, unfortunately drug assisted, but his VO2 max score was measured at 84. Whether that was drug assisted or not, we'll never know. But there's a number of other athletes, and most of these athletes compete in long distance races, so cycling, marathon running, etc., cross country skiing. Alright, so what we're going to do is create a model of the lungs, and we're going to watch the following clip which will show us how to do that.
Ever felt out of breath? Ever wanted to go that extra mile? Well, now you can with a little help from us. Hi, my name's Steve and I'm from the Questacon Science Squad, and today I'm going to show you how to make a model of a lung. What you'll need is a pair of scissors, 2 balloons about 30 centimeters in diameter, a straw, a rubber band, a piece of plasticine about 2 centimeters across, a pencil, and a plastic bottle about 600 milliliters large. First, what you'll need to do is get your balloon and cut off the neck, like that. This is now going to act as our diaphragm. Next, you want to get the plastic bottle and cut the base off, like I've done here. Now get your diaphragm and stretch it very, very tightly over the end of your bottle. Now, this can be a little bit fiddly, so I've prepared one earlier. Now get your other balloon and put the straw in through the neck and tie it off tightly using your rubber band. The balloon is going to act as our lung, and the straw is going to act as our windpipe. Great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get the pencil and put it through the centre of our ball of plasticine. Then we get our straw and we put it through the hole we've just made and pinch it off at the ends so that no air can escape. Now you want to get the balloon, squeeze out all the air and feed it into the top of your bottle. Push it all the way down, and then once you've done that, squeeze off the sides of the plasticine so that once again no air can come through. Now we're going to see if our lung can breathe. So watch the inside balloon as I gently pull on the bottom balloon. And we bring it in and out. In and out. And then if we're running really fast, we breathe in and out, and in and out, and in and out, and in and out. To find out how this works, or to find out how you breathe using your diaphragm, visit the Questacon Science Squad website. See you next time.
And that's it for today's presentation. Feel free to go back through this PowerPoint at any stage of this video, at any stage, to revise the respiratory system.